In the afternoon of May 14, 2013, in Fei County on the outskirts of Linyi City, in China's northeastern province of Shandong, 4 young men climbed the walls surrounding a home they targeted to rob. The home was in a remote area of the village, with few neighbors close by to witness the quartet's intended scheme. The homeowners, a newlywed couple, were at work at the time. As they entered the grounds of the home, the couple's puppy curiously approached the strangers. The 4 invaders, aged between 26 and 17, fearing the puppy may bark and alert people to their presence, brutally beat the innocent dog to death with a cinder block. They then broke their way into the home and began searching for anything of value they could find. 3 of the 4 home intruders, Zhang Xuejun, Wang Jiying, and Zhao Feng, had broken into the home on a previous occasion. This time they were joined by Fu Gang, who Zhang Xuejun met only a couple of days before, in an internet cafe in the city. As they ransacked the home, the attention of Fu Gang was drawn by a wedding photo on a wall of the master bedroom. Zhang Xuejun had already told him how beautiful the woman was, and Fu Gang agreed. He wanted to see the woman for himself in real life. While sitting around the kitchen table, helping themselves to the couple's watermelon, the 4 agreed to wait there until the newlywed couple came home. The following morning, Liu Mo was waiting for her son and new daughter-in-law to join her for breakfast. Her son had only recently moved out of the family home after getting married, but he and his wife made a point to have breakfast with her most mornings. By 10:30 there was still no sign of them, so she called her son to see what the problem was. The phone wasn't answered, a recorded message telling Liu Mo that her call couldn't be connected and that the phone was out of service. A touched concern, she made the short walk to her son's new home to investigate for herself. On entering the courtyard of the home, her concern quickly turned to panic. She saw the mangled body of the couple's dog, a blood-stained cinder block beside it. Despite fearing what she was going to find, Liu Mo entered her son's home. Once inside, she was greeted with a confusing scene. Recently cooked food, enough for several people, was left out on a coffee table in the living room. The bed in the master bedroom was covered with fresh sheets that hadn't been slept in. And there was no sign of her son or daughter-in-law. She convinced herself that they must have had an argument, her daughter-in-law going to her own family, and her son going after her. Although she tried to tell herself everything was fine, she still called the police and informed them the couple were missing. When police arrived, it didn't take them long to spot signs that this was a serious incident. The windows of the home were covered by safety bars. On one window, investigators noticed that bars had been cut and bent back, leaving a large enough gap for people to climb through. There were also recently installed security cameras whose wires were cut, rendering them useless. Once inside, investigators found the metal handles of mops that were badly bent, and wooden handles of brooms that were snapped in half. The food left on the living room coffee table was surrounded by more bowls and chopsticks than necessary for just 2 people. The recently cooked food had seemingly been shared with guests, who police believed had likely been uninvited visitors. In one of the bedrooms, clothes and other personal items were strewn across the floor and bed. The closets were open and had clear signs someone had searched through them. More disturbingly, the woman's clothes and underwear were discovered with obvious damage caused by tearing. In the master bedroom, the scene was very different. At a quick glance, it appeared to have been left undisturbed. The bed was covered with a fresh clean quilt and didn't appear to have been used the previous night. However, police thought it odd that the quilt was the only bedding covering the mattress. There was also the faint odor of cleaning products in the air, signifying that someone had attempted to clean the room very recently. On closer inspection, what looked like bloodstains were found on furniture in the room. And while checking the mattress, a bloody paw print was discovered under one of the pillows. The home was declared to be the scene of a serious crime. More officers were called in to perform a full forensic examination of the property and to help search the surrounding area in the hope of finding the couple or evidence of what had happened to them. Police search dogs quickly picked up the scent of blood in the fields outside the crime scene and led officers to a cave, only a few hundred meters from the home. A trail of bloodstains guided the officers to the mouth of the cave. Looking inside, investigators were greeted by a large amount of coin stalks which had no reason to be there. They'd been placed there by someone to hide something deeper inside. As they made their way into the cave, pushing aside the coin, they soon found what they suspected was hidden. 2 bodies, 1 male and 1 female. The bodies were taken away to be formally identified and forensically examined, along with other items found in the cave. But with even just a cursory glance, investigators could see the horrific and extensive injuries suffered by both victims. Around the same time as the discovery of the cave, other officers were conducting a preliminary search of the river the home backed onto. Close to the river bank, 3 plastic bags were pulled out of the water. The bags largely contained empty drinks bottles and other garbage, but among the rubbish they found the marriage license of the missing newlywed couple. There were also a pair of men's trousers. A search of the pockets turned up 2 cards. One was a bank card in the name of the missing man. The other a subsistence allowance card under a different name. The subsistence allowance card is a bank card issued to people who suffer extreme financial difficulty because they are unable to work, usually due to illness or disability. The bearer receives welfare payments from the government to help cover their basic living costs. The name on the card was Fu Lao Han. With some quick checking, police felt that the old man pushing 70 years of age and suffering severe health problems was an unlikely suspect. His son, 26-year-old Fu Gang, however, had recently been released from prison after serving a 5-year sentence. Police immediately began searching for Fu Gang as a prime suspect. After speaking to his bedridden father, they discovered Fu Gang took the subsistence allowance card to spend his sick father's welfare payments. Due to his time in prison, they had images and the fingerprints of Fu Gang on file. They could check any fingerprints found at the crime scene against his, and they also had images of him to distribute to the public. Soon enough, investigators had images of a second person of interest related to the case. Tracing the bank card found in the discarded trousers, they were able to get security footage of the last time it was used. The images showed a male entering the ATM wearing a woman's hooded coat. He withdrew as much money as he could with several different bank cards, smiling excitedly as he withdrew the money. The bodies discovered in the cave were formally identified as the newlywed homeowners. 26-year-old Sun Gang and his 24-year-old wife Li Hong, married only 6 months prior to the home invasion and their eventual deaths. Their cause of death was recorded as suffocation, but both had suffered numerous other extensive injuries, which likely would have ended their lives. Both victims had been subject to a long, sustained assault over the course of around 8 hours, before their hell was finally brought to an end by their attackers. With help from witnesses and security camera footage at different bus stations, the police soon got on the trail of Fu Gang. He was seen with the person caught on camera withdrawing money from the ATM, who was identified as Zhao Feng, along with 2 other individuals. The quartet had boarded a bus together heading for the western province Qinghai, some 1,600 kilometers from Shandong. Police managed to intercept the bus in the city of Tai'an before it could leave Shandong. As the officers got on the bus, Zhang Xuejun was the first to react. He desperately tried to clamber out of a window to escape, but was quickly grabbed and subdued. The remaining 3 suspects were easily identified and arrested. Zhao Feng was the youngest member of the gang. At 17 years of age, he had only recently dropped out of school and started his life of crime with 2 of the other suspects. One of those was the 23-year-old Wang Jiying. He already had a criminal record and had spent 3 years in prison for petty crimes. When police attempted to arrest him, he made a move to pull out a knife he was carrying, but officers reacted quickly and dealt with him. The other was the leader of the criminal trio, Zhang Xuejun, who tried to escape through the window. He was 25 years old and had also spent time in prison for various petty criminal acts. The final suspect was the newest member of the group, Fu Gang. Fresh off his imprisonment, he wasted little time in returning to his criminal career. Weighing around 200 pounds, Zhang Xuejun thought he could be a useful enforcer for the gang. As evidence was put in front of them, it didn't take long for the quartet to confess individually. 3 of the 4 showed some level of remorse, while Fu Gang seemed to only feel remorseful that it was his father's welfare card that put the police on their trail so quickly. In an effort to avoid the death penalty, Zhang Xuejun would give the most thorough confession of what happened that night. Once he'd finished his story, the details were so shocking, there was little chance that any court would show leniency for his cooperation. He, along with Wang Jiying and Zhao Feng, had spent the previous days moving around other towns in the county, committing petty thefts. The older brother of Zhao Feng was getting married, so the trio were getting some money together to enjoy the upcoming celebrations. They met Fu Gang in an internet cafe and got to know each other while playing video games. As they talked more, Zhang Xuejun decided to bring Fu Gang into the group and told him about a robbery they were planning. Zhang Xuejun, Wang Jiying and Zhao Feng had broken into the home before, and Zhang Xuejun spoke a lot about how beautiful the bride in the wedding photos looked. Having already agreed to go along with the trio, Fu Gang didn't need the extra motivation, but hearing about the beautiful bride only made him more keen. The next day when they got to the home, they made sure the coast was clear before climbing the walls. They spotted the newly installed security cameras, but Fu Gang took the lead. He cut the wires with a knife he brought along, and assured the others he could delete the video off the computer. They entered the home through the same window they used on their previous visit and got to work. On seeing the wedding photos, Fu Gang had no intention on leaving before Li Hong returned home, and he could see her in the flesh. The three without knives grabbed some from the kitchen, as well as some ice creams from the freezer, and the four hid in one of the bedrooms, enjoying their ice cream as they waited. Sun Gang and Li Hong returned at around 7 in the evening. It was dark and they didn't see the body of their dog in the courtyard. Once inside, as he was settling down for the night, the screams of his wife brought Sun Gang running to the master bedroom. As Zhao Feng held Li Hong down on the bed at knife point, the others confronted Sun Gang. Having picked up a folding stool responding to the screams of his wife, Su Gang swung it at the men, hitting Zhang Xueying. It did little good. The three pushed him back, threatening him with their knives. They beat Su Gang to the ground. Zhang Xuejun then bound his hands with handcuffs he brought with him. Wang Jiying went through their captive's pockets, taking out his wallet. He took the cash and 3 bank cards and asked for the PIN numbers. At first Sun Gang refused to tell them, so in response they viciously kicked and stomped their defenseless victim. To get the beating to stop, Sun Gang gave them a PIN number for the cards, hoping that if he gave them the number, they would just leave with the bank cards. However, the gang didn't just take his word for it. They opened the banking app on his phone and checked. Sun Gang had given them a fake number. For this he received another beating, but the situation was about to get much worse. Wang Jiying went into the bedroom where Li Hong was being held by Zhao Feng. He began violating her to punish her husband's lie. In desperation, Sun Gang gave them the number to the cards in the hope they would stop assaulting his wife, but it was no good. Wang Jiying continued. With no plans to leave, Zhang Xuejun decided they should eat. He looked through the fridge and found some pork. Fu Gang said he was pretty good in the kitchen and volunteered to cook. Unfortunately, his culinary skills weren't quite as good as he claimed. Knowing the husband was a chef, they uncuffed him and demanded he make something for them. As he cooked for them, Sun Gang could still hear the sounds of his wife being violated by Wang Jiying, who was now joined by Zhao Feng. After finding the food agreeable, the four sat in the living room watching TV. Zhang Xuejun told the others that they would end the lives of the newlyweds that night. Wang Jiying and Zhao Feng were told to go to the nearest bank and withdraw as much money as they could. On their way out, Zhao Feng grabbed a hooded jacket that belonged to Li Hong, which he wore in an attempt to hide his identity. While the pair were out at the bank, Zhang Xuejun and Fu Gang stripped the clothes off the bound husband and gave him another beating, until Fu Gang decided it was his turn with Li Hong. Zhang Xuejun kept watch over the husband, who begged for them to stop hurting his wife. As they both listened to the assault on Li Hong by Fu Gang from the other bedroom, they heard strange noises, which Zhang Xuejun described as a popping sound between the moans and screams. Soon Wang Jiying and Zhao Feng returned with the money, as well as beer, cigarettes and snacks they bought on the way back. Once Fu Gang was finished, Zhang Xuejun took his turn. He told Li Hong he would let her and her husband live if she submitted to him. Over the next few hours, the beatings of Sun Gang and the violations of Li Hong continued. They both begged for their lives, but the four had already made up their mind. Before leaving, Fu Gang said he wanted a little more time with Li Hong. Each time he'd been in the room with her, there'd been strange noises. Curious about what he did with her, the others went to watch. They found Fu Gang piercing the flesh of Li Hong with toothpicks and burning her with his cigarette. They decided it was time to bring an end to the ordeal. They wanted to hide the bodies before daylight and risk being seen by anyone. They first went to the husband Sun Gang, who was naked, handcuffed and his legs bound. They tried choking him with a wire, but pulled so hard the wire snapped, leaving Sun Gang still breathing. They tried again with a chain, but it also snapped too quickly. Frustrated, Fu Gang pierced the husband's chest with his knife, puncturing the man's lung, but still he didn't die. They then placed a plastic bag over his head and smothered him until there were no more signs of life. Going into the master bedroom, Li Hong asked them about her husband. They told her he was dead, and now it was her turn. As Wang Jiying and Zhao Feng held her down on the bed, Fu Gang and Zhang Xuejun placed a plastic bag over her head and tightened their hands around her throat. They held on until there were no more signs of life. To make sure she was dead, Fu Gang once again burned her with a cigarette. Once it was done, the four took the bodies to the cave. Zhang Xuejun remembered seeing the last time they broke into the home. Both Wang Jiying and Zhao Feng were told to go back and clean up the scene as Zhang Xuejun and Fu Gang covered the dead couple. Being aware of DNA being left at the scene, Zhang Xuejun told Wang Jiying and Zhao Feng to make sure they changed the sheets, clean up as much blood as they could, and collect any cigarette butts and bottles. They also took the computer and disposed of the items in the river. Fu Gang had thought the husband's trousers looked pretty good, so decided he would keep them for himself. He changed out of his own and put them on. However, at the river he noticed they were stained with blood, so changed back into his own. He forgot about putting his father's welfare card in one of the pockets, and threw them into the river with the other evidence. The quartet then left the area, splitting up into groups of 2 before meeting up later the same day. Interrogators pushed Zhang Xuejun on how premeditated their actions were. He asked if being truthful could really reduce his punishment. The police responded that it was up to the courts. He admitted that he wasn't really interested in the robbery. He wanted to go back to assault Li Hong after seeing her in the photographs during the previous break-in. While Zhang Xuejun appeared to be genuine in his confession, the autopsy report on both victims painted a much more brutal and vicious picture. The extent of the injuries inflicted on Su Gang and Li Hong went way beyond what Zhang Xuejun claimed. Broken bones, multiple lacerations, puncture wounds, heavy bruising, deep tearing bite marks and evidence of foreign objects being inserted into them were all found on both victims. The autopsy also showed that Li Hong was 3 months pregnant at the time of the assault. On June 22, 2016, Zhang Xuejun, Fu Gang, and Wang Jiying were sentenced to death for intentional homicide and the other crimes they committed against the couple. They were all executed shortly after being handed their sentence. As Zhao Feng was 17 at the time of the crime, he was a minor and so couldn't be executed at that age. He was still handed a death sentence, but with a 2-year suspension, and the possibility of his punishment being reduced to life imprisonment. In 2019 it was officially announced that the sentence of Zhao Feng had been commuted to life in prison, with his sentence to be reviewed every 7 years. The reason given was for his good behavior and commitment to rehabilitation. However, there have been other claims made. A former inmate of the prison who was serving a 13-year sentence said that Zhao Feng was severely beaten by other inmates. This has left Zhao Feng extremely cognitively impaired and with the mental age of a young child. These though are just rumors, and there is no way to know if that is true unless he is released. With the feelings of anger people have towards this case, that day will likely never come. Just in case, there are many people in China who try to keep the case in the public eye, so that if he isn't going to be executed, Zhao Feng will never be among the public again. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, leaving a comment, and subscribing to the channel. And hope to see you again for the next dark tale from the Middle Kingdom.